It was exactly 2:17 a.m. on the night of November 11, 2022. The streets of the old town of Backrooms were soaked in silence. No cars moved. No lights flickered. The air felt too still, as if even the wind had decided not to pass through that night. I was standing at the edge of the forest line where the old tunnel began. The same tunnel that had terrified people for over 5 decades. The same tunnel whose name locals refused to mention after sunset. That tunnel was not part of any known railway or drainage map. Some elders claimed it had been there since the British era, built during the late 1800s for secret transportation of prisoners and sensitive cargo. But after the partition, the tunnel was completely sealed. Years later, a landslide revealed part of the entrance again. What was strange was that even after its discovery, no one from the town dared to go near it. Some believed it was cursed. Others said those who went in never came back. And then there were stories about voices, heard late at night, whispering near the tunnel's mouth. There was a man named Raymond who lived nearby. In 1986, he claimed to have entered the tunnel with a lantern and a notebook. He never returned. Only his notebook was found a week later in the graveyard, soaked with something thick and black like oil. No name. No signs. Just a line on the last page that said, "It moves when I move." I had grown up hearing about that tunnel. And I had always been told to stay away. But something inside me was never able to forget it. Maybe it was the silence around it. Maybe it was the mystery. Or maybe it was something deeper. Something calling. That night, I was not alone. My dog Jeff was with me. Jeff was a large, quiet shepherd mix with sharp ears and eyes that never blinked when he stared at something. He had sensed I was not going for an ordinary walk that night. Still, he stayed close, walking ahead but always pausing, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I did not. As we stood facing the tunnel entrance, half buried in vines and shadow, I felt the cold rising from the earth. The entrance was wide, but it was shaped unevenly, as if someone had forced it open from inside. There were no lights, no sounds, only the echo of our own breathing. Jeff sniffed the ground and let out a low growl. I could feel it now too. The heavy feeling that this place had a memory of its own. But what really happened inside this tunnel? Why did people disappear without leaving even a trace behind? And what was it that moved only when someone moved? If you want to uncover what lies beyond that darkness, what secrets this tunnel has hidden for decades, then make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is not just a story, this is what really happened to me and Jeff inside that tunnel. As I stood in front of those 3 uneven stones, something about the place made my skin crawl. The air felt thicker around them, heavier, like something was holding it down. Jeff stayed close to my leg. He did not bark or growl, but I could feel his uneasiness. His eyes kept moving from one grave to the next, as if he expected something to rise out of them. I slowly stepped forward and crouched beside the first stone. There were no names, no dates, not even a symbol carved into the surface. Just old stone covered in moss and dirt. The earth around it had been disturbed, not freshly, but recently enough that the color of the soil was different from the rest of the tunnel floor. It looked like someone had either buried something here not long ago, or worse, dug something out. That I looked at the second grave, and this one was slightly smaller. The stone had a crack down the middle, and something about its shape felt off. I brushed off some of the dirt from the front of it and noticed a deep scratch on the base. Not the kind of scratch caused by time or weather. It looked deliberate, like someone had tried to chip something off. The third grave was different. Its stone leaned slightly to one side, and right next to it, barely hidden beneath a patch of dried grass and rock, I noticed a piece of old fabric sticking out of the ground. I reached out and tugged at it. The fabric tore easily, and the smell that came out of the soil was sharp and bitter, almost metallic. I dropped it and stepped back. Jeff started barking, low and steady. He was staring at the far corner of the tunnel where the light from my flashlight barely reached. I turned and raised the beam. There was nothing at first. Then something moved, slowly, just enough to catch the edge of the light. It was not a figure or a face. It was something hanging. A rope. I walked towards it, careful with each step. The tunnel curved slightly, hiding more of the space behind the graves. As I moved closer, I realized it was not a rope at all. It was a piece of cloth, maybe part of a coat or a bag, hanging from a rusted nail in the wall. Beneath it, half buried in the dirt, was a wooden box, small and covered in dust that I kneeled and brushed off the surface. The box had no lock, only a rusted hinge, barely holding it together. I opened it slowly, half expecting it to fall apart in my hands. Inside, there were 3 items. A child's drawing, folded and stained with time. A broken compass, its needle spinning freely. And a key. An old, blackened key that I could not understand it. Why would someone bury these things next to graves in a forgotten tunnel? Were these objects connected to the people buried here? Or were they meant to keep something locked away? And the biggest question that started to grow in my mind, why was the entrance to this tunnel sealed for decades, and who had reopened it? If you want to uncover what lies beyond this tunnel and the truth behind the key, the compass, and the drawing, then stay with me. That I stared at the key in my hand. It was heavy, cold, and oddly sharp around the edges, as if it had been carved by hand instead of being made in a factory. There were small marks on it, not letters or symbols, but more like scratches. Some looked recent. Others seemed like they had always been there. Jeff sniffed at the box, then backed away. His tail was low, and his ears were pulled back. I had never seen him act this cautious, not even when he chased wild dogs near our street. Whatever was down here had shaken him, and I could feel the same chill crawling up my spine that I picked up the broken compass next. Its glass was cracked, and the needle spun in every direction, refusing to settle. I tapped it lightly, but it kept turning, like something around us was disturbing its function. I remembered my grandfather once told me that old tunnels often carried magnetic disturbances, especially if they passed near old train lines or machinery. But this tunnel had never been used for anything industrial. According to the records I had read, this path was abandoned even before the town was built around it. That I unfolded the drawing last. The paper felt like it would tear if I breathed on it too hard. It was drawn with crayons, rough and childlike. It showed 3 stick figures standing in front of what looked like a gate. Behind the gate was a dark shape. No face, no hands, just a black mass drawn over and over again in thick lines. One of the stick figures had a red circle around its head. That was it. No words. No name. Just a child's drawing that made my heart race. That I looked around the tunnel again. The air felt tighter, like the walls were pressing in slightly. I needed to move, not just stand here trying to make sense of it. I took the box, closed it gently, and stood up. There was only one direction left to explore, the deeper part of the tunnel where the light faded into complete blackness. As I walked, I noticed the texture of the ground change. The soil became softer, almost damp. The walls were no longer lined with stones but were rough, natural earth, as if this section had been dug by hand. The air smelled different too, like rust and something old. Not rotting, but ancient. Then I saw it. A wooden door that was built into the tunnel wall, half covered by roots and dirt. The wood was dark, nearly black, and the hinges were rusted. There was a keyhole. I did not even need to check it. I already knew the key I found would fit. That I held the key tightly in my hand, but something inside me hesitated. I turned and looked back. Jeff was standing a few feet behind me, not moving forward. He stared at the door, then looked at me with wide eyes. That I stepped closer to the door. I raised the key and placed it in the lock. And then I stopped. If this tunnel had been sealed for decades, who built this door inside it? What was behind it that someone had tried so hard to hide? And most importantly, who left that drawing of the dark figure standing behind the gate? The key was still in my hand. I just stood there for a moment, staring at that old wooden door. It looked weak, like a gentle push could break it apart, but something about it felt heavy, like it had been holding something in for a long time. Jeff sat quietly behind me. He had not barked, not moved, not made a sound. Just sat there, ears stiff, breathing slow, watching that door without blinking. That I took a breath and moved closer. The key slid into the lock with no effort. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I had expected some resistance, some rust. But it turned smoothly, like someone had used it recently. That thought hit me hard. This place looked untouched for decades. Why would the lock feel like it was open just days ago? I slowly turned the key. There was a dull click. It was not loud, but in that dead silence, it felt like it echoed all around me. My fingers touched the door. The wood was cold. I pushed gently. It opened with a loud creak and revealed nothing but darkness behind it. I raised the flashlight and stepped forward. Jeff followed me this time, though he stayed close. The air changed inside. It was colder, thicker, and there was a strange smell. Not of decay or dust. It smelled like wet stone mixed with something metallic. The walls inside were different. Not brick or mud like the earlier tunnel. These were smooth. Dark stone with lines running through them, almost like veins. The tunnel took a slow left turn. There were no sounds except our footsteps and a faint humming in the distance. Not mechanical. Not wind. Just a soft hum, like the kind you cannot explain but feel deep in your chest. Then the space opened up slightly. There they were, 3 graves that I stopped walking. My flashlight shook a little in my hand. The graves were fresh. Not by years. By weeks, maybe days. The soil was uneven and darker. Stones had been placed at the head of each grave, but there were no names. No markings. Except one. The middle stone had symbols scratched into it. Not English. Not Urdu. Just strange shapes. One looked like an eye. Another like a crooked triangle. And one was just a spiral. I crouched down near the middle grave, trying to make sense of it. Jeff let out a low sound behind me. A sort of soft growl, almost like a warning. I stood back up slowly. Then came the sound, a dull thump. From deeper in the tunnel. That I held the flashlight straight, but the beam could not reach the end. Another thump followed. A little louder. A little closer, and I stood there, still. Not out of courage, but because I was too afraid to move. There was no wind. No vibration. Just that strange, heavy sound from the darkness ahead. Who had been buried here? Why were there no names? What did those symbols mean? And most of all, was someone, or something, still down there? If you want to know what I found further inside this tunnel, what was behind that sound, and what truth these graves are hiding, then like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from. That I kept the beam of my flashlight steady toward the sound, but the light simply faded into the black. I did not move. I did not breathe. Even Jeff had gone quiet behind me, frozen in place. The thump had stopped, but its echo remained in my mind, like it had left something behind even after it ended. That I took a step forward. Then another. Every step felt heavier than the last. My ears were ringing slightly, not from sound, but from silence so thick that it started to press against my thoughts. The deeper I walked, the more unnatural the air began to feel. The walls had changed again. They looked wet now, like someone had recently splashed water on them. But when I touched them, they were dry. Stone, cold and smooth, almost like polished marble, but darker, deeper in color. And now, those strange symbols had started appearing more frequently. They were carved along the walls, getting bolder, more aggressive in their shape. Some looked like eyes. Others looked like twisting roots or distorted faces. That I reached the far end of the room with the graves. There was another narrow opening, barely enough for one person to walk through. I had to turn slightly to fit inside. The passage was tight, and the air was completely still. That was the part that scared me the most. There was no movement. No draft. Nothing. It felt like walking into a vacuum. Jeff refused to follow. He sat at the edge of the room with the graves, watching me with wide eyes, ears pinned back. I did not force him. I understood. Something inside me was telling me to stop too. But I kept going. As I moved through the narrow passage, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The walls were not made of stone anymore. They were lined with wood. Old, dried, splintered wooden planks. The same kind of wood used in coffins. That realization hit me like a wave. My steps slowed. The floor creaked under my weight. And then I heard it again. A breath. It was not my own. It came from somewhere just ahead of me. A single exhale. Slow. Deep. And human. I froze. My mouth went dry. My flashlight flickered for a moment, and I slapped it gently. It steadied. I took one more step, and the floor under me made a sound, louder than before. Then, ahead of me, the narrow path opened into a small room. It was circular, completely covered in those symbols. They were not just on the walls now. They were on the floor, the ceiling, and something else. There was a chair. A single wooden chair, placed exactly at the center of the room. And sitting on that chair was a figure. Its back was facing me. I stopped moving. My heart felt like it had stopped. The figure did not react. It just sat there, shoulders hunched slightly, head tilted downward. I could not see the face. Its hands were resting on the arms of the chair, fingers long, pale, unmoving. Was it alive? Was it waiting? Why was it sitting here, alone, in the heart of this tunnel? I did not say a word. I did not dare call out. I just stood there, flashlight aimed at its back, too afraid to take another step, and too curious to leave. What was this figure? Was it human? Or had something else been buried with the graves outside? The torchlight shook in my hand as I stepped deeper into the tunnel, my breath echoing off the damp, stone walls. I still remember the chill that crept through my jacket as we moved forward, me and Jeff. The air was heavier now. The silence, deeper. I turned a corner, and that was when I saw it. In the corner of the tunnel, under the crumbling arch, there was a wooden chair. Old, crooked, almost blending into the darkness if my light had not landed on it. Someone was sitting on it. Still. Facing the wall. No movement at all. His back was hunched, and he was covered in what looked like a thick, dusty shawl. His hair was gray, dry, hanging like ropes down the sides of his head. He looked like a statue, too still, too quiet. I did not call out. I could not. My chest tightened. Not from fear at first, but confusion. Why would anyone be sitting alone inside this forgotten tunnel, in the dead of night, without a sound? Jeff stood stiff beside me. His tail was low, ears pointed forward, but he did not bark. He just let out a low growl. That was enough for me to know, this was not normal. I stepped a little closer. The floor beneath my boots was rough, scattered with pebbles and dirt. The closer I got, the more I started to notice the strange markings on the ground around the chair. Symbols, carved deeply into the stone floor, circles, jagged lines, shapes I had never seen before. They were not random. They formed a pattern. I felt cold sweat on the back of my neck. Then something happened that made my legs freeze in place. The man's hand twitched. Not in a sudden way. It was slow, like he had not moved in a long time. The fingers of his right hand curled inward, as if testing the ability to move again. My instincts screamed at me to back away. I took one small step backward, and that was when he moved his head. Just slightly. Just enough to show me the side of his face. I cannot forget what I saw. His skin looked dry, almost paper-like. His eye was hollow. Black. Like there was nothing inside. No reflection. No life. Still, no words came from him. No sound. Just that dead, empty stare in the dark. The carvings around his chair suddenly made sense. This was not just a tunnel. It was not just some abandoned part of the old town. It was a place of ritual. A place where something had happened, long ago, something that was never meant to be disturbed. I looked closer at the chair, an old wooden frame, but the back of it was carved with the same symbols I saw on the floor. It looked less like a chair, and more like a throne built for someone important, or someone cursed. Then Jeff barked that it was a loud, sharp bark that echoed like a crack of thunder through the tunnel. The man disappeared, not walked. Not ran, that he was just gone. The chair was empty, that I froze. Jeff was growling now, stepping back, tail between his legs. On the wall behind the chair, I saw something scratched into the stone. Faint. Faded. But I could make out two letters clearly, S and K. That I stood there for a long minute, heart pounding, breath shallow. The tunnel suddenly felt deeper than before. Like it had no end. I did not know if I had just met a ghost, a memory, or something far worse. But I knew one thing for sure: this tunnel was not built for people to walk through. It was built to keep something in. I left that room slowly, not running, not rushing, just watching every shadow as I backed away with Jeff beside me. But questions kept spinning in my mind. Who was that man? What do the letters S and K stand for? And what is waiting deeper inside this tunnel that someone wanted to keep hidden? If you want to uncover the truth behind the symbols, the letters, and what really happened in this place, that I did not sleep that night, even after returning from the tunnel, after locking every door in my house and keeping Jeff close, my mind refused to slow down. That man, his face, those hollow eyes. The symbols. The letters S and K. Everything kept repeating in my head like an unfinished puzzle that I was forced to keep solving. The next morning, I knew I had to go back, not out of bravery. Not out of curiosity. But because I could feel it inside me now. Like the tunnel was calling me. Like something had been left behind that needed to be finished. That I packed only what I needed. A brighter torch. A flask of water. My old diary to record anything I found. Jeff was already waiting by the door, his eyes fixed on me, tail wagging low, almost nervously. He knew we were going back. The sky was gray. Clouds thick. Even nature felt quieter than usual. The town was silent as I passed through the streets. It was like no one knew what was buried just beneath their feet. That we reached the entrance again. This time, I did not hesitate. The air inside was colder. The silence deeper. But it was not the kind of silence you find in lonely places. It was the kind that listens. The kind that watches. That we reached the same point. The chair was still empty. The symbols still carved into the floor. But now, something had changed. The letters on the wall were clearer now. They were no longer just S and K. More of the stone had crumbled, revealing the full name, Suleiman Khazar. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. I had heard it before. Years ago. From my grandfather. He used to tell me about a man who once lived in this town. A man who vanished underground during the early days of the settlement. According to old stories, Suleiman Khazar had been obsessed with the dead. Not in a morbid way, but spiritually. He believed the land beneath the town was sacred. That ancient souls were buried here long before our ancestors ever settled. He wanted to protect them. Or at least that is what he told others. But people began to fear him. Strange deaths. Animals disappearing. And then one day, he was gone. Just like that. Some said he had sealed himself underground. Some said he was buried alive by villagers. Others believed he never existed. Just another ghost story to scare children. But now I knew he had existed. And he had never left. I sat in front of the chair. Not too close. Just enough to study the symbols again. Then I noticed something. A loose stone in the wall beside the carving. I reached for it and pulled. Behind it was a small wooden box. Dry. covered in dust. I opened it slowly, unsure what I would find. Inside was a journal. It was old, the pages yellowed, but the handwriting was still visible. It was his. Suleiman Khazar's final writings. He wrote about rituals. About protecting the town from spirits buried deep within the land. He spoke of how he had made contact with an entity that offered knowledge in return for silence and sacrifice. The symbols were not to keep something out, they were to keep something in. In his final entry, he wrote, "If anyone finds this, I failed. I thought I was strong enough. I thought I could hold it back. But it was stronger. It needed more. I gave it everything. My name. My body. My soul. Now I am part of it. I beg you, seal this place. Do not let it rise again." My hands were shaking as I closed the book. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the tunnel. No sound. Just wind. From deep inside. I turned slowly, and I saw them. 3 figures. Standing in the distance. Pale. Silent. Watching. Jeff started growling again. I held him close, took the journal, and backed away. The air grew heavier with each step. But the figures did not follow. They just watched. And then, one by one, they faded into the darkness. As if they were never there. I sealed the entrance myself that evening. Pushed the stones back in place. Covered it with dirt. I even marked the ground with red paint, just so no one else ever tried to open it. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I have not heard a single strange sound. No more whispers. No more shadows. But sometimes, when I lie awake at night, I still feel something watching. Not evil. Not violent. Just present. Maybe it is Suleiman. Maybe he finally found peace. Maybe the truth was never about fear but about warning others not to make the same mistake. This town has many stories. But this one stayed hidden too long. And I think it is finally over. But one last question remains. What exactly was that entity he tried to control? And is it really gone? If you want me to explore the deeper truth behind Suleiman's rituals and what could still be buried under this old town, then like this video and subscribe to the channel, and tell me, from where in the world are you watching this story? I will be waiting.